shitty public education, poor foster care system, right? All these things that are going to breed crime. We know it. We know that that's a recipe for crime. I know I got the wrap-up sign, so I'm going to end in just 1 second. I just think it's important to also ask, you're all young folks and you got open minds, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. What kind of a society? I think that we need to ask some of the what-ifs. What if we had a really, I won't go into that. I will end on this. What if we had a really different kind of society that we live in today? One where there wasn't so much inequality. What if instead of, and I know a lot of you are probably training to be police officers, but I'll just throw this question out there. What if instead of having police officers patrolling the streets, that we had social workers driving around trying to help people? And I think the what-ifs are important to ask, in our day-to-day organizing. Martin Luther King asked an important question. Why do we pay for water when 2/3 of the world is made up of water? It can sometimes feel overwhelming, the task in front of us, about trying to make some real changes. And I just think, like, for any activist or anybody who's thinking about becoming an activist, the one thing we have to do is let outrage at injustice be our guide. Just like it was the guide for Ida B. Wells, just like it was the guide for Emmett Till's uncle. And I'll just end on this. Emmett Till's uncle stood up to the threat that night that they said to him, if you want to live to be 64, you never saw us that night. Well, what happened in that year of 1955? If 2 white men were going to be going in the courtroom, they couldn't find any blacks to go in and say anything against them. They could never find witnesses to do that because they knew that they would be lynched. They would be killed or harmed. So they often wouldn't do it. Well, Emmett Till's uncle, he was afraid. And he knew it probably wouldn't matter even if he did go to the courtroom, but he did go to the court. And they asked him to stand up, if he could, and identify the people that took Emmett that night. And he did. He stood up and he pointed. And he said, there they are. And he never went to Mississippi again. They took him away from there because he knew his life was in danger. And I think that was an incredible, he felt it was important to stand up against injustice. And that was pre-civil rights. That was before the Montgomery bus boycott. That was before the 1960s sit-down struggles. And he still had the bravery to stand up. But you know what? It helped light the fire to those later struggles because people learned about the case of Emmett Till, and they stood up and they realized we have to stand up against this kind of racism and injustice. And I'll just end with a quote from Emmett Till's mom, just so that people know. People probably do know, but Emmett was actually from Chicago, and when he was lynched, he was visiting with his relatives in the South for the summer. This is what she said about what happened to her son. 2 months ago, I had a nice apartment in Chicago. I had a good job. I had a son. When something happened to the Negroes in the South, I said, that's their business, not mine. Now I know how wrong I was. The murder of my son has shown me that what happens to any of us, anywhere in the world, had better be the business of all of us.
Thank you, Marlene, for helping us to understand first that lynching is a form of terrorism. We are in this so-called business, war of terrorism. So what about we started? Eliminating the alternative. Thank you also for helping us to understand that fighting crime at the individual level is not enough. And that's something that we always be emphasizing here, especially here in this institution. How is that we're going to prepare our students, especially those who are going to go into law enforcement agencies, to fight crime committed by corporations. Corporate crime. Why is that we can't go against this? And thank you for helping us to also understand that race matter, but also class matter. You can be black, or Latino, Asian, whatever they call here, that you're now part of the dominant group. But let me tell you something. Also money matters. That's the picture of those who are incarcerated. You do the analysis by race, yeah, blacks, Latinos. You do the analysis by class, poor people, working class people. Why? Because poor people go to prison and rich people get richer. Very interesting. And thank you for helping us to understand that activism and solidarity is very important. So, Lawrence, we're ready for you.
Oh, yeah.
It's always a pleasure and an honor to speak to students anywhere. I've been to Elementary, spoke at the university in London. I've been to universities and colleges throughout this country. And I say that because you are those who will make the decisions for us tomorrow. Students, I believe, played a major role in shifting the vote in favor of Mr. Obama. And so you have power. You have it individually and you have it collectively. And so on that note, I want to thank you for coming out here. And the reason I want to thank you is because at one point I languished in a death house cell waiting to die. And my hope came from reading the newspaper or hearing on the radio that people like yourselves came together to challenge the instrument of death, the death penalty. And because of that, I stand here today because of the case called Furman versus Georgia, which abolished the death penalty. It said it was racist. It was not impartial. And that the death penalty really should not be in this country because of so many differences and injustices, bigotry and racism. And who can guarantee that the person who passes judgment and makes the decision is not a racist, is not a bigot? Who can guarantee that? No one. It's ironic that legislators, in one stroke of a pen, say that killing is wrong, is against the law, and in the next stroke, authorize themselves to kill. Think about it. Lynching then, lynching now. Let's bridge that gap. Frederick Douglass, the most noblest abolitionist history is known, said that slavery has been fruitful in giving itself names. It has been called the peculiar institution, the social system, and the impediment. It has been called by a great many names, and it will call itself by yet another name. You and I and you had better wait and see what new form this monster will assume, what new skin this snake will come forth next. The criminal justice system in America is racist. And it deals in the same modem as slavery. It bodies in human flesh. Attached to every prisoner is an item number that in some states are worth, and some states in some conditions are worth up to $100,000 per prisoner. Judges, lawyers, DAs, cops, and people who sit at desks and write notes from one place to the next. All of them benefit from that one person. Zoning